Zara's arms burned as she carried her mother through the bustling corridors of Station Omega-7. The great dragon's once magnificent scales had turned a sickly pale green, and thick barnacles covered nearly every inch of her hide. Each step sent shooting pains through Zara's back, but she refused to let her mother touch the cold metal floor. "Please, mother, just a little further," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the station's life support systems. The dragon's breathing was shallow and labored, each exhale creating small puffs of steam that dissipated quickly in the recycled air. Other beings moved through the corridors with purpose. Tall Centaurians with their flowing robes, stocky Corvan traders hauling cargo containers, and sleek ethereal scouts gliding silently on their anti-grav platforms. None of them paid attention to the young humanoid struggling with her burden. Dragons were common enough in this part of the galaxy, though most had never seen one in such poor condition. Zara's people, the Dracani, had been bonded with dragons for thousands of years. They shared a symbiotic relationship that few other species understood. The dragons provided protection and transportation across the void between worlds, while the Dracani offered care and companionship. But lately, more and more dragons have been falling ill with the same mysterious condition that now plagues Zara's mother. The barnacles had appeared first as small, harmless-looking growths. The Dracani healers had dismissed them as a minor irritation, something that would pass with time. But the growths multiplied rapidly, spreading across the dragon's scales like a plague. Worse, they seemed to be draining the life force from their hosts. Zara's mother, once capable of breathing fire hot enough to melt starship hulls, could now barely produce warm breath. "Sector 7G," Zara muttered to herself, reading the signs posted at each intersection. Almost there. She had heard rumors about a human mechanic who worked in the lower levels of the station. Other species spoke about humans in hushed tones, describing them as strange beings who could fix anything, no matter how hopeless it seemed. They called humans the tinkerers or the impossible solvers. Some said humans had a gift for seeing solutions where others saw only problems. Zara wasn't sure she believed the stories. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having only made first contact 50 years ago. How could such a young species possess abilities that eluded civilizations millions of years older? The ethereals had mastered energy manipulation before Earth's sun had finished forming. The Corvan Empire had perfected biological engineering when humans were still primitive mammals. Yet somehow, these newcomers had earned a reputation for miraculous problem-solving. As she descended deeper into the station, the corridors became narrower and less well-maintained. The polished walls of the upper levels gave way to exposed conduits and flickering lights. The air grew thicker with the smell of lubricants and ozone. This was where the mechanics and engineers worked, far from the pristine diplomatic areas above. Zara's mother stirred weakly in her arms, opening one golden eye. "Little star," the dragon whispered in their shared mental language. "You should not waste your strength on this old shell." "Don't talk like that," Zara replied, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "We're going to find help. The human will know what to do." The dragon's eye closed again, but not before Zara caught a glimpse of the pain there. Her mother had been everything to her: protector, teacher, friend. The thought of losing her was unbearable. A loud clang echoed from somewhere ahead, followed by the sound of power tools. Zara quickened her pace, hope flickering in her chest. She rounded a corner and found herself facing a heavy blast door marked with symbols she didn't recognize. The door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling out from within. She could hear someone working inside, the rhythmic pounding of metal on metal, the hiss of welding torches, and occasional muttered curses in what she assumed was the human language. Taking a deep breath, Zara pushed through the door. The workshop was unlike anything she had ever seen. Tools hung from every available surface, many of which she couldn't identify. Workbenches overflowed with mechanical parts, electronic components, and half-finished projects. Holographic displays showed complex technical readouts that meant nothing to her. The air thrummed with energy from dozens of different machines. In the center of the chaos stood a human male, his back turned toward her as he worked on what appeared to be a starship engine. He wore simple coveralls stained with grease and coolant, his dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail. When he moved, Zara could see the confident efficiency that marked someone completely comfortable in their element. "Excuse me," Zara called out, raising her voice over the noise of the workshop. The human turned, wiping his hands on a rag. He was younger than she had expected, probably only a few years older than herself. His brown eyes widened slightly when he saw her burden, but his expression remained calm and professional. "Well, that's not something you see every day," he said, his voice carrying a strange accent. "Marcus Chun," he added, extending a hand in what Zara recognized as a human greeting gesture. "And you've got yourself a sick dragon." "I'm Zara," she replied, too exhausted to attempt the hand gesture. "Can you help her?" "Everyone says humans can fix anything." Marcus studied the dragon for a long moment, his eyes taking in every detail of the barnacle-covered scales and labored breathing. "I've never worked on a dragon before," he admitted, "but I've seen these barnacles on some of the deep space freighters. Nasty little parasites. Let's get her somewhere comfortable and take a proper look." He led them to a cleared area near the back of the workshop, where he quickly assembled a makeshift bed from foam padding and thermal blankets. Zara gently lowered her mother onto the improvised surface, her arms finally getting relief from the weight. "Now then," Marcus said, pulling up a stool and activating a handheld scanner. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The scanner hummed as it passed over the dragon's body, displaying readouts on a small screen. Marcus frowned as he studied the data, occasionally adjusting settings and rescanning particular areas. "These aren't ordinary barnacles," he said finally. "There's some kind of biomechanical hybrid. See these filaments? They're tapping directly into your mother's nervous system. No wonder she's so weak." Zara felt her heart sink. "Can you remove them?" "Removing them isn't the problem," Marcus replied, setting down the scanner. "The problem is doing it without killing the host. These things have integrated themselves so deeply that just cutting them off would cause massive trauma." He stood and began pacing, his hands gesturing as he thought out loud. "We need something that can dissolve the connecting filaments without damaging the underlying tissue. Something precise, something that can target the foreign material while leaving the dragon's own biology intact." Zara watched him work through the problem, impressed despite her worry. She could see why humans had earned their reputation. Marcus wasn't just looking at the symptoms. He was analyzing the entire system, understanding how all the pieces fit together. "The good news," he said suddenly, stopping his pacing, "is that I think I know how to do it. The bad news is that it's going to require some custom equipment and about 18 hours of very delicate work." 18 hours? Zara's voice cracked. "Does she have that long?" Marcus knelt beside the dragon and gently placed his hand on a patch of unbarnacled scale near her head. The dragon's eye opened, focusing on the human with surprising clarity. "She's tougher than she looks," he said softly. "Dragons don't give up easy. But we need to start now." Zara nodded, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "What do you need me to do?" "First, we need to stabilize her condition. I've got a nutrient force system that should help maintain her strength. Then, I need to fabricate some specialized tools. The removing process will require nanoscale precision." As Marcus began setting up equipment, Zara marveled at his confidence. Here was a being from a species barely 50 years into galactic civilization, taking on a medical problem that had stumped healers with millennia of experience. Yet somehow, she found herself believing that he could actually do it. "Why are you helping us?" she asked as Marcus attached monitoring leads to her mother's scales. "We can't pay you much." Marcus paused in his work and looked at her with those steady brown eyes. "Where I come from, when someone's family is sick, you help. It's that simple." The dragon's breathing seemed to ease slightly as the four began providing nutrients directly to her bloodstream. Colors started returning to her pale scales, though the barnacles remained firmly attached. "This is just the beginning," Marcus warned as he began pulling components from various storage containers. "The real work starts now. But I promise you this, I'm not giving up on her." As the human began assembling his custom tools with practiced efficiency, Zara settled beside her mother's head. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe the stories about humans were true. Maybe the strange, young species really could work miracles. Outside the workshop, Station Omega 7 continued its eternal rotation. But inside that cluttered room, a human was preparing to fight for the life of a dragon. And somehow, Zara knew that her mother was in exactly the right hands. Marcus worked through the night, while Zara maintained a vigil beside her mother. The workshop had fallen into a different rhythm now. The chaotic energy of normal repairs replaced by the focused intensity of life-or-death precision work. Every tool Marcus selected seemed carefully considered, every movement deliberate. The fabricator should finish the microsurgical array in about an hour, Marcus said, checking a display on one of his machines. "While that's running, I need to synthesize the dissolution compound." Zara watched him move between workstations with fluid efficiency. She had expected him to consult databases or call for assistance. But Marcus seemed to be working entirely from his own knowledge and intuition. "How do you know what to make?" she asked. "Pattern recognition," Marcus replied, carefully measuring chemicals into a mixer. "Your mother's barnacles share characteristics with 3 different parasitic organisms I've encountered. The neural interface resembles viridian mind leeches. The physical attachment method is similar to Terran remora fish, and the energy-draining mechanism matches certain cybernetic viruses." He paused to check his measurements before continuing. "Humans excel at finding connections between seemingly unrelated things. We call it synthesis thinking. Take a solution from here, combine it with a technique from there, adapt it for a completely different application." The dragon stirred as Marcus spoke, her golden eyes following his movements with growing interest. Despite her weakened state, there was intelligence there, ancient wisdom recognizing competence when she saw it. "Tell me about your people," the dragon said, her mental voice reaching both Zara and Marcus. "Your species intrigues me." Marcus looked up from his work, apparently unbothered by the telepathic communication. "We're problem solvers by necessity," he said aloud. "Earth wasn't an easy world. No natural weapons, no thick hide, no poison. We had to get creative to survive." He returned to his chemical mixing, but continued talking. "Other species evolved specialized abilities over millions of years. We learned to make tools, to adapt, to find new uses for old things. When you're the weakest predator on your planet, you either get clever or get dead." "That explains the reputation," Zara murmured. "But how did you learn to work with such precision?" Marcus activated the chemical mixer and moved to check on the fabricator. Necessity again. Earth medicine required exact measurements, precise timing. Our technology developed differently than most species. We had to make do with limited resources, so we learned to maximize efficiency. The fabricator chimed, indicating completion. Marcus opened the chamber and carefully lifted out what looked like a collection of impossibly delicate tools. Each instrument was smaller than Zara's fingernail, crafted with tolerances that seemed to defy the limitations of matter itself. "Molecular-scale manipulators," Marcus explained, holding up one of the tools to the light. "Each one can target specific chemical bonds without affecting surrounding tissue. The trick is getting the targeting parameters exactly right." He spent the next hour calibrating each tool, running tests on sample materials to ensure perfect precision. Zara marveled at his patience. There was no rush, no urgency in his movements despite the clock ticking on her mother's life. Instead, there was methodical thoroughness that spoke of complete confidence in the process. "The dissolution compound is ready," Marcus announced as another machine completed its cycle. "Now comes the tricky part, mapping every barnacle's connection to your mother's nervous system." He activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional image of the dragon's body. The barnacles appeared as bright red growths, while the underlying nervous system showed as delicate blue threads. Where the parasites had connected, the two colors merged into purple nodes. 237 individual connections, Marcus said, studying the display. Each one will need to be severed in the correct sequence to prevent cascading trauma. Zara felt her heart sink. That could take days. Not with proper preparation, Marcus replied, manipulating the hologram to show different angles. I need to program removal sequence algorithms for each tool. The nanoscale manipulators will work simultaneously, but they need precise timing. As he worked at a computer terminal, fingers flying over controls Zara couldn't understand, she realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just mechanical skill, it was artistry. Marcus was composing a symphony of molecular surgery, orchestrating hundreds of microscopic movements into perfect harmony. Your mate shows great wisdom, the dragon commented to Zara privately. He's not my mate, Zara replied, blushing slightly. He's just helping us. The dragon's mental voice carried amusement. Perhaps, but observe how he works. No other species approaches problems with such creativity. Zara watched Marcus test his programming on simulated barnacle models, making tiny adjustments to timing and sequence. He was right about human thinking being different. Where other species might have developed one perfect solution over millions of years, humans seem to improvise and adapt in real time. Sequence mapping complete, Marcus announced. We can begin the procedure. He moved the microsurgical array into position over the dragon's body, each tool finding its designated starting point with mechanical precision. The dissolution compound waited in a series of micro-reservoirs, ready to be applied exactly where needed. This will take approximately 6 hours, Marcus said, his hands poised over the control interface. I'll need to monitor every step personally. The slightest deviation could cause problems. Can I help? Zara asked. Keep talking to your mother. Keep her calm. The procedure will be more successful if her nervous system remains stable. As Marcus began the delicate work, Zara settled beside her mother's head and began sharing memories of their time together. Flights through nebulae, explorations of ancient ruins, quiet moments watching stars be born. The dragon's breathing steadied as the familiar mental contact provided comfort. The microsurgical tools moved with impossible precision, each one targeting specific molecular bonds within the barnacle attachments. Marcus monitored dozens of readouts simultaneously, making minute adjustments to maintain perfect balance. Occasionally, he would pause to recalibrate or adjust the dissolution compound mixture. The neural connections are more complex than I anticipated, Marcus murmured after 2 hours of work. These parasites are more sophisticated than anything in my database. Is that a problem? Zara asked, trying to keep worry out of her voice. It's a puzzle, Marcus corrected, and humans love puzzles. He made a series of rapid adjustments to his programming, adapting the removal sequence in real time. Where the original plan had called for simultaneous severing of connection groups, Marcus began implementing a cascading approach that followed the natural structure of the dragon's nervous system. Better, he said as the new approach showed immediate improvement. The parasites evolved to integrate with dragon neurology specifically. They're using the host's own neural pathways to maintain their hold. As the hours passed, Zara watched barnacles begin to loosen and fall away. Each success revealed healthy scales underneath, their natural color slowly returning. Her mother's breathing grew stronger, and occasional wisps of actual flame flickered from her nostrils. Halfway done, Marcus announced as morning approached. The remaining barnacles should be easier now that we've broken their coordinated network. But as he spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the workshop. Several displays flashed warning messages, and the microsurgical array automatically paused its operation. What's wrong? Zara asked, fear creeping into her voice. Marcus was already scanning through status reports, his expression growing grim. The remaining barnacles are adapting. They're trying to strengthen their connections to prevent further removal. On the holographic display, Zara could see the remaining parasites glowing brighter, their neural connections thickening and multiplying. The barnacles were fighting back. "Can you adjust the procedure?" "I'm already on it," Marcus replied, his hands flying over the controls. "But they're adapting faster than I can modify the targeting parameters. We need a completely different approach." The dragon stirred, lifting her head slightly. "Young human," she said, "these creatures are not merely parasites. They possess collective intelligence." Marcus paused in his work, considering this new information. A hive mind. That's why they're coordinating their defense. His eyes lit up with sudden inspiration, which means they have a weakness. He began pulling up new displays, analyzing the communication patterns between the remaining barnacles. Every hive mind needs a control node, a central coordinator. If we can identify and disable it, the others will lose cohesion, Zara finished, understanding immediately. Exactly. But finding the control node among 200 remaining parasites. Marcus trailed off, studying the neural mapping display with intense concentration. "There," the dragon said suddenly, focusing her attention on a cluster of barnacles near the base of her neck. "I can feel their commands originating from that location." Marcus quickly refocused his instruments on the indicated area. The display showed a barnacle significantly larger than the others, with neural connections radiating outward to every other parasite on the dragon's body. "That's our target," he said grimly. "But it's also the most heavily defended connection. Removing it incorrectly could cause massive neural trauma. And leaving it means losing your mother," Zara added softly. Marcus was already reconfiguring his tools, preparing for the most delicate operation of his career. "Then, we better get this right the first time." As he prepared to attempt the impossible, Zara couldn't help but think that this was exactly the kind of moment that had built humanity's reputation among the stars. When faced with an unsolvable problem, humans didn't accept defeat. They redefined the solution. Marcus stared at the control node through his magnification display, studying every filament and neural pathway with the intensity of a surgeon preparing for the most critical operation of his career. The master barnacle pulsed with sickly bioluminescence, its commands rippling through the network of remaining parasites like poison through veins. "The challenge isn't just removing it," Marcus explained as he made microscopic adjustments to his instruments. "The control node has integrated itself into your mother's primary neural trunk. It's essentially holding her central nervous system hostage." Zara watched the display with growing dread. The parasite had wrapped itself around critical nerve clusters like a malignant tumor, its tendrils reaching deep into the dragon's brain stem. What happens if we damage those nerves? Best case scenario, paralysis. Worst case. Marcus didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. The dragon's golden eyes remained focused and alert despite her weakened state. "Human," she said, her mental voice carrying ancient dignity. "I have lived 3,000 years. If this is how my story ends, so be it. But I will not have my daughter watch me waste away slowly." "Nobody's dying on my watch," Marcus replied firmly. "There's always another option. We just haven't found it yet." He began pulling up new diagnostic displays, analyzing the neural patterns in unprecedented detail. The workshop filled with the soft hum of scanners working at maximum resolution, mapping every neuron, every synapse, every molecular connection. "The control node isn't just parasitic," Marcus murmured as data streamed across his screens. "It's mimicking your mother's own neurochemistry. That's how it's maintaining such deep integration." Zara leaned forward, trying to understand the complex readouts. "Can you use that against it?" "Maybe." Marcus's fingers danced across control interfaces as he began a new set of calculations. If the parasite is mimicking dragon neurology, it might also respond to dragon neurotransmitters. The question is whether we can trick it into releasing its hold voluntarily. He turned to the dragon with sudden interest. "I need to understand your species' neural architecture better. How do dragons control their flame production?" The dragon's eyes brightened with understanding. "Through concentrated thought patterns. We focus thermal energy through specific neural pathways, channeling it from our core to our breath chambers. And those pathways run right through the area where the control node is attached. Marcus said, excitement building in his voice. What if we could trigger a controlled flame burst? Not enough to harm you, but enough to create a neural overload in the parasite. Zara felt a spark of hope. Would that work? It's risky, Marcus admitted. The thermal surge could damage surrounding tissue if we get the timing wrong. But the control node's mimicry might also be its weakness. If it's truly integrated with dragon neural patterns, it should be vulnerable to dragon neural responses. He began reconfiguring his equipment, switching from surgical tools to neural stimulation devices. I'll need to map your mother's flame production pathways first, then calculate exactly the right stimulation to trigger a controlled response. The next hour passed in intense preparation as Marcus studied the dragon's unique neurology. Unlike any other species he had encountered, dragons possessed specialized neural clusters designed specifically for thermal energy manipulation. The pathways were elegant in their efficiency, evolutionary marvels that allowed conscious control over internal combustion. Fascinating, Marcus said as he completed his analysis. Your neural architecture is completely unique. Most species developed consciousness as a byproduct of survival needs, but dragons seem to have evolved consciousness specifically to control elemental forces. We are children of fire and void, the dragon replied with quiet pride. Our ancestors learned to think so they could master flame. Marcus programmed his neural stimulators with careful precision, creating a sequence that would trigger the dragon's flame response while limiting the thermal output to safe levels. The margin for error was microscopic, too little stimulation, and the parasite would remain unaffected. Too much, and he could cause permanent brain damage. I'm going to start with minimal stimulation and gradually increase until we get a response, Marcus explained as he positioned the stimulation devices. Tell me the instant you feel thermal buildup in your flame chambers. The first pulse was barely perceptible, a gentle tickle along ancient neural pathways. The dragon's eyes flickered, but there was no other response. Marcus increased the intensity slightly, watching for any sign of reaction from either the dragon or the control node. I feel warmth, the dragon reported as the third pulse activated dormant thermal systems. It has been so long since I could generate proper heat. On the display, the control node began to glow more brightly as it responded to the increased neural activity. Its filaments twitched, momentarily loosening their grip on surrounding tissue before tightening again. It's working, Marcus said, adjusting the stimulation pattern. The parasite is being forced to process signals it wasn't designed for. But it's also adapting. He increased the intensity again, and this time the dragon's nostrils released a small puff of actual flame, weak but genuine dragon fire. The control node pulsed erratically, its bioluminescence flickering as foreign neural patterns flooded its system. More, the dragon urged, strength returning to her mental voice. I can feel the pathways opening. Marcus pushed the stimulation higher, carefully monitoring both the dragon's responses and the parasite's growing distress. The control node began broadcasting chaotic signals to the other barnacles, causing them to writhe and loosen their holds on healthy scales. The network is destabilizing, Zara observed, watching barnacles fall away across her mother's body. They're losing coordination. But as the stimulation reached critical levels, new alarms began sounding. The dragon's thermal buildup was approaching dangerous levels, threatening to trigger an uncontrolled flame burst that could incinerate everything in the workshop. I have to reduce power, Marcus said, his hand hovering over the emergency shutdown. No, the dragon commanded, her eyes blazing with internal fire. Trust me, young human. I have not forgotten how to control flame. Instead of shutting down the stimulation, Marcus watched in amazement as the dragon began directing the building thermal energy with precision he hadn't thought possible. Rather than a wild explosion, She channeled the heat into focused streams that targeted the control node directly. The parasite shrieked, an actual audible sound that filled the workshop with harmonic discord. Its bioluminescence flared blindingly bright for a moment before beginning to fade. The neural connections that had seemed unbreakable began dissolving under the assault of pure dragon fire, channeled through thought alone. Now, Marcus shouted, activating his dissolution tools while the control node was stunned. The microsurgical array moved with lightning precision, severing the weakened connections before the parasite could recover. The control node released its hold and fell away like a dying spider, its commands to the remaining barnacles cut off permanently. Across the dragon's body, the surviving parasites began detaching on their own, their coordination broken and their life support severed. The dragon's breathing deepened as her nervous system fully reconnected with itself for the first time in months. Color flooded back into her scales, transforming them from sickly pale to vibrant emerald. Her eyes blazed with renewed intelligence and power. "By the void," she whispered, stretching wings that hadn't moved properly in weeks. I had forgotten what it felt like to be whole. Marcus slumped back in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "How do you feel? Any numbness, tingling, loss of sensation?" The dragon carefully tested her various systems, flexing claws, adjusting wing positions, and generating small, controlled flames. Everything functions perfectly, better than it has in months. Zara threw her arms around Marcus in an impulsive hug, tears streaming down her face. "You did it. You actually did it. We did it," Marcus corrected gently. "Your mother's control over her flame was the key. Without that precision, the thermal approach would never have worked." The dragon rose to her full height, stretching muscles that had been cramped and painful for too long. When she looked down at Marcus, there was something new in her ancient gaze, respect earned through demonstrated competence. "Human," she said formally, "you have given me back my life. By the old codes, this creates a debt that can only be repaid in kind." Marcus looked puzzled. "I don't understand," Zara explained quietly. "Mother is offering you a life bond. It's the highest honor a dragon can bestow." That's incredibly generous," Marcus replied, "but I'm just a mechanic. I was happy to help." The dragon's laugh rumbled through the workshop like distant thunder. "Just a mechanic? Young human, you have accomplished what the greatest healers in the galaxy declared impossible. You saw solutions where others saw only death. This is not the work of just anything." As the morning shift began throughout Station Omega 7, word spread quickly about the impossible cure that had taken place in the humans' workshop. Other beings began arriving, some seeking repairs for their own impossible problems, others simply curious about the species that seemed to redefine the possible on a daily basis. But in the quiet of the workshop, as the dragon tested her renewed strength and Zara finally allowed herself to believe her mother would be all right, Marcus was already thinking about the next problem that might come through his door. After all, as far as humans were concerned, impossible was just another word for challenging. 3 days after the successful treatment, Marcus's workshop had become the most talked-about location on Station Omega 7. Word of the dragon's miraculous recovery had spread through the galactic communication networks faster than light itself, carried by traders, diplomats, and travelers who had witnessed the impossible firsthand. "You realize you've created quite a stir," Zara said, watching Marcus work on a damaged hyperdrive motivator that had been deemed irreparable by certified technicians. "The Galactic Medical Council wants to interview you." Marcus didn't look up from his work, though his shoulders tensed slightly. "I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy who likes fixing things." "That's exactly why they want to talk to you," Zara replied with amusement. "Traditional medicine couldn't help Mother. Traditional mechanics wouldn't have even tried. But humans don't seem to recognize the word impossible." The workshop door chimed, and a tall ethereal glided in on its anti-gravity platform. The being's crystalline form sparkled with internal light, and its voice carried harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal hearing. "I seek the human called Marcus Chun," the Ethereal announced. I am Scholar Veltar of the Ethereal Science Collective. We wish to study your methodologies. Marcus finally looked up from his work, grease-stained and clearly uncomfortable with the attention. There's nothing to study. I just looked at the problem and found a solution. Precisely the mystery we wish to understand, Veltar replied. Our civilization has existed for 12 million years. We have cataloged every possible approach to parasitic neural infections. Yet you discovered a treatment method that exists nowhere in our databases. Maybe that's the problem, Marcus said, returning to his hyperdrive repair. You've cataloged every possible approach based on your way of thinking. Humans think differently. The Ethereal's form flickered with what might have been confusion. Please explain this difference. Marcus set down his tools and considered the question. How many Ethereals does it take to fix a hyperdrive? 1. Assuming proper training and certification, Veltar replied promptly. How many humans does it take? I do not understand the query's purpose. 0. Marcus said with a slight smile. Because a human would figure out how to make the hyperdrive fix itself. Zara laughed at the confused expression on the Ethereal's features. He's not joking. That's exactly the kind of lateral thinking that saved my mother. Before Veltar could respond, another visitor entered the workshop. This time, it was a Corvin trade representative, its stocky form laden with various containers and data tablets. Mechanic Chun, the Corvin said in its gravelly voice, I am Trade Factor Gordhack. My consortium wishes to offer exclusive rights to your techniques. We have prepared generous compensation. My techniques? Marcus looked genuinely baffled. I don't have any special techniques. I just solve problems as they come up. The improvisation methodology, Gordhack clarified, the ability to synthesize solutions from unrelated sources. Our analysts estimate this could revolutionize manufacturing, medicine, and engineering across the galaxy. Marcus shook his head firmly. That's not something you can package and sell. It's just thinking. As more visitors arrived throughout the day, researchers, traders, officials, and curious beings from dozens of species, Marcus grew increasingly overwhelmed. Each wanted to understand, quantify, or purchase something that seemed as natural to him as breathing. This is getting ridiculous, he muttered to Zara as a delegation of Centaurian academics set up recording equipment in his workshop. I fixed one dragon. Suddenly, everyone thinks I have magic powers. You don't understand, Zara said gently. What you did wasn't just heal my mother. You proved that problems everyone assumed were permanent could actually be solved. You've given hope to species that had given up. That evening, as the crowds finally dispersed, Zara's mother visited the workshop. The dragon had to fold her wings tightly to fit through the door, but her renewed vitality was unmistakable. Her scales gleamed with health, and small wisps of flame danced around her nostrils with each breath. Human, she said, settling carefully among the workbenches, I bring troubling news. The parasites that afflicted me are spreading to other worlds. What was done to me was no accident. Marcus paused in his cleaning, giving the dragon his full attention. What do you mean? The barnacle creatures were engineered, she explained, her mental voice carrying grim certainty. During my recovery, I was able to examine their structure more clearly. They were designed specifically to target dragons, to drain our life force for some unknown purpose. Who would do such a thing? Zara asked, her face pale with shock. Unknown, but the pattern is accelerating. Dragon-bonded worlds across 3 sectors report similar infections. Without treatment, entire populations of dragons could die within the year. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. How many dragons are we talking about? Thousands, the dragon replied solemnly. Each bonded to families like mine and Zura's, each facing the same slow death I was rescued from. Then, we need to scale up the solution, Marcus said simply, already moving toward his computer terminals. One custom treatment isn't enough. We need mass production. It cannot be done, Scholar Veltar interjected, having remained to observe. Your technique required 18 hours of individual attention and custom-fabricated tools. The logistics of treating thousands of subjects are impossible. Marcus stopped working and turned to face the ethereal. There's that word again. Impossible. He smiled slightly. You know what humans call impossible logistics? Tuesday. Over the next several hours, Marcus began designing what he called a distributed treatment protocol. Instead of requiring every dragon to come to his workshop, he would create standardized tool packages that could be operated by minimally trained technicians across the galaxy. The microsurgical arrays can be simplified, he explained to his growing audience of researchers and officials. Most of the complexity was in the initial diagnosis and custom programming. If we standardize the approach based on what we learned from Zara's mother, he pulled up holographic displays showing modified equipment designs. Portable fabrication units can create the dissolution compound on site. Automated diagnostic scanners can identify control nodes. The actual treatment can be reduced to a 4-hour procedure. Even if this works, trade factor Gordhack pointed out, the manufacturing costs would be astronomical. Who will fund such an undertaking? The dragons will, Zara's mother said quietly. We are not without resources. More importantly, we remember our debts. As the implications of this statement sank in, Marcus realized he had stumbled into something far larger than a single medical case. Dragons had been part of galactic civilization for millennia. Their gratitude would carry significant weight. There's more, the dragon continued. Other species are beginning to report similar parasitic infections. Different organisms, but the same energy-draining effect. Whatever force created the dragon parasites is targeting other species as well. A coordinated attack on galactic biodiversity, Scholar Veltar observed, its form flickering with alarm. But what could be the purpose? Marcus was already pulling up data feeds from across the galaxy, cross-referencing reports of unexplained illnesses with energy signatures and biological markers. The pattern that emerged was chilling in its scope and precision. Someone's farming us, he said grimly. The parasites aren't random. They're designed to harvest specific types of life energy from different species. Dragons for thermal energy, ethereals for quantum resonance, corvins for bioelectric potential. But why? Zara asked, though she dreaded the answer. Marcus continued analyzing the data, his expression growing darker. Because someone's building something that requires massive amounts of diverse energy. And they don't care how many people die to get it. The workshop fell silent as the full implications became clear. This wasn't just a medical crisis. It was the opening move in a war against all galactic life. And somehow, a human mechanic had become the first line of defense. So, Marcus said finally, cracking his knuckles as he turned back to his computers, looks like we got some work to do. As he began designing treatment protocols for a dozen different species simultaneously, the representatives of ancient civilizations watched in amazement. They had come seeking to understand human problem-solving methods. Instead, they were witnessing humanity's greatest strength in action, the absolute refusal to accept that any problem was too big to solve. Outside the workshop, Station Omega 7 continued its rotation through the void. But inside that cluttered room, the future of galactic civilization was being rewritten by a mechanic who had never learned that some things were supposed to be impossible. 6 weeks after discovering the galactic parasite conspiracy, Marcus's workshop had transformed into something resembling a military command center crossed with a medical research facility. Holographic displays showed treatment progress across dozens of worlds, while fabrication units worked around the clock producing standardized cure packages. 17 more species successfully treated, Zara announced, updating the main status board. The Andromedan Collective reports complete parasite elimination from their outer colonies. Marcus nodded absently, focused on a particularly troubling data stream from the Vega system. That's the good news. The bad news is that new parasite variants are appearing faster than we can design countermeasures. The workshop had become a hub for the greatest minds in the galaxy. Ethereal scholars worked alongside Corvin bioengineers, while Centaurian mathematicians collaborated with human technicians. The common threat had created unprecedented cooperation between species that had barely spoken for centuries. The enemy adapts quickly, observed Dr. Kithara, a Zephyrian scientist whose species communicated through controlled atmospheric disturbances. Her words carried undertones of frustrated urgency. Each time we develop a new treatment, they modify their parasites to resist it, which means we're dealing with active intelligence, not just programmed organisms, Marcus replied, analyzing the latest mutation patterns. Someone's watching our responses and adjusting in real time. Scholar Veltar materialized beside the main display, its crystalline form resonating with data harmonics. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual energy signatures near the galactic core. Massive construction, though the purpose remains unclear. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. The energy signatures matched theoretical projections he'd been developing based on the parasite's harvesting patterns. They're building something big, something that requires enormous amounts of life force from multiple species. A weapon? Asked Commander the Rex, a Corvin military officer who had arrived with the latest supply convoy. Worse than a weapon, Marcus said grimly. Based on the energy requirements, I think they're building a consciousness transfer device, something that would allow them to absorb the life force and memories of entire civilizations. The implications struck the assembled beings like a physical blow. Not just death, but complete erasure, the theft of everything that made each species unique. Who could conceive of such horror? Dr. Kithara's atmospheric disturbance carried notes of revulsion. Someone who views other species as resources to be harvested, Marcus replied. He turned to address the room. But here's the thing about humans. We don't like bullies. And we really don't like thieves. He began pulling up new displays, showing modifications to their existing treatment protocols. We've been playing defense this whole time, reacting to each new parasite variant. Time to change the game. What do you propose? Commander the Rex leaned forward, his military training recognizing strategic thinking. We stop treating the symptoms and start attacking the source, Marcus said, highlighting energy pathway maps throughout the galaxy. The parasites need to transmit harvested energy back to their masters. If we can trace and disrupt those transmission pathways, we can follow them back to their origin, Zara finished, understanding immediately. Exactly. But more than that, we can turn their own network against them. Marcus began sketching modifications to the treatment devices, transforming them from simple cure dispensers into sophisticated tracking and transmission systems. Every time we remove a parasite, we learn more about their communication protocols. Instead of just destroying them, we reprogram them to send false data back to the source. Scholar Veltar's form brightened with comprehension. Deception warfare. Feed them incorrect information about harvested energy levels, while simultaneously tracking their command signals back to the source. Dr. Kithara added, her atmospheric patterns showing excitement. The next phase of the operation required careful coordination across hundreds of worlds. Treatment teams continued curing infected beings, but now each procedure included the collection of detailed intelligence about parasite communication systems. Marcus worked with barely 3 hours of sleep per day, driven by the knowledge that every moment of delay meant more lives lost to the energy parasites. His workshop had expanded to fill an entire section of Station Omega 7, with fabrication centers, research labs, and communication hubs operating in perfect synchronization. The tracking protocols are working, Zara reported during one of their brief strategy meetings. We've identified 17 major transmission nodes and mapped partial pathways to what appears to be a central control facility. Where? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The Galactic Core. Specifically, a region that's been avoided by all spacefaring species for the past million years due to dangerous radiation levels. Marcus studied the star charts with growing certainty. Not radiation. Camouflage. They've been hiding in plain sight, using natural hazards to keep everyone away. Commander the Rex activated military communication channels, connecting to fleet commanders across the galaxy. If we're going to assault their stronghold, we'll need coordinated military action. Ships, weapons, troops from multiple species. No, Marcus said quietly, causing everyone to turn toward him. Military action won't work against this enemy. They've had millions of years to prepare defenses, and they understand conventional tactics better than we do. Then, what do you suggest? The Corvin commander asked. Marcus smiled, and there was something in that expression that made ancient beings pause with respect. We use humanity's greatest weapon. We do something they'll never see coming because it's never been done before. He began outlining a plan that was so audacious, so unprecedented, that even species with millions of years of experience found themselves struggling to comprehend its scope. Instead of attacking the enemy's stronghold, Marcus proposed to turn their own consciousness transfer technology against them. The parasites aren't just harvesting life force, he explained. They're collecting the essence of what makes each species unique. Our creativity, our problem-solving abilities, our different ways of understanding reality. They want to steal everything that makes us who we are. And you propose? Scholar Veltar asked. We give them exactly what they want. We let them connect to every major civilization in the galaxy simultaneously. But instead of stealing from us, they'll be receiving something they're not prepared for. Marcus activated a new display showing a network that spanned the entire galaxy. Every treated parasite, now reprogrammed and ready to transmit. Every species thinks differently. Humans improvise, ethereals analyze, Corvins systematize, Zephyrians harmonize. Separately, each approach has limitations. But together, you want to create a galactic collective consciousness. Dr. Kithra breathed, her atmospheric patterns showing awe and terror in equal measure. Temporarily, Marcus clarified, just long enough to overwhelm their consciousness transfer system with more diversity than it can process. Instead of stealing our thoughts, it'll be force-fed every possible way of thinking simultaneously. The plan was madness. It was impossible. It had never been attempted and could result in the destruction of every participating civilization. It was also completely, uniquely human in its approach. The risks are incalculable, Scholar Veltar pointed out. The alternative is extinction, Marcus replied simply. Besides, impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. As preparations began for the most ambitious undertaking in galactic history, beings across 1,000 worlds looked toward the human who had started with a single sick dragon and ended up orchestrating the defense of all life in the galaxy. In her restored health and strength, Zara's mother spoke for dragons everywhere when she said, "This is why the universe needed humans. Not for your strength or your technology, but for your absolute refusal to accept that any fight is unwinnable." The stage was set for a battle unlike any in galactic history. On one side stood an ancient enemy with millions of years of preparation and technology beyond comprehension. On the other stood the combined civilizations of the galaxy, united by the crazy idea that sometimes the best solution to an impossible problem was to try something even more impossible. Marcus Chun, mechanic and miracle worker, prepared to find out if the universe's greatest puzzle could be solved with humanity's greatest gift, the stubborn belief that there was always another way.